All right, welcome everyone to the Tuesday, May 27th, Tumwater City Council work session. Welcome everyone to this very beautiful evening. We are going to start off. I believe that we have all the council members present, so we can dispense. Councilmember Agabi is right there. So with that, we will move to the first agenda item, which is the Historical Commission project presentation. And I believe Chuck Denny will start, and then I believe Dave Nicandri will be also presenting.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Chuck Denny, Parks and Recreation Director, here tonight with a very easy role of introducing Dave Nicandri, a longtime Tumwater Historic Commission member and former City Council member. As a Historic Commission was looking at their work plan for 2025 and various projects that they might do, Commissioner Nicandri stepped up and volunteered to do a project looking at Tumwater's historical trails and roadways and how we might identify those and then make them a little more visible and significant with the city, so that we're not only improving the community, but really teaching the history and what was where in the past. Working with Darlene Kemery, Dave has put together a great presentation and done some great research on the Cowles Trail, the Oregon Trail, and also a few other historical markers that are being suggested with this project. So the Historical Commission was unanimously supportive and very excited about this presentation and the projects that it outlines, and voted to send it to the City Council for further review and hopefully in the end support to move these projects forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave, and we'll share a screen here and get that presentation started.
Actually, I don't see him logged in yet. I'm looking.
He is me tonight.
Oh, he is you tonight.
So we are sharing a laptop, so I'm just going to scoot it over to him.
Okay, great. Thank you.
As soon as I work out the share, we'll be right there. There it is.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be able to address the mayor and council tonight. Before proceeding any further, I again want to acknowledge the tremendous assistance of Darlene Kemery, whose work is what you're actually going to see. I'll take the blame for all of the thinking, errant or otherwise, but Darlene was of signal help, and I want to acknowledge her support from the get-go. So by way of introduction, I only want to say one thing, because I enjoy it so much when I have the opportunity to come to a Tumwater City Council meeting. I just love the fact that almost 50 years after I was first elected to the Tumwater City Council, I'm still with it and able to go to meetings and engage in civic dialogue. So as I say, it's an honor.
Hey,
so
Dave, can I say something? You're not quite on camera. You're kind of off.
I'm not going to be on camera because of the logistical arrangements, which I can leave Chuck to explain. But because of our configuration here, oh, there I am.
There you are.
Slowly coming into view again.
Yeah, you're almost there. There you go.
Yeah, thanks to Darlene's technical handiwork there. Okay, very good. Hello, everyone. So let's get started. I'll ask Darlene to go to the first slide. About 2 years ago, when the Historic Commission was kicking around ideas, I conjured up the progenitor of the project that's in front of us, which was the note, because I'd spent some time down in California visiting historic sites, and I saw frequent postings of historic Highway 99 signs. Because these are quite common in many parts of the country, most famously with Route 66 signs across the desert Southwest. But I proposed to the commission and to Chuck that we put up some historic Route 99 signs, since we all so commonly refer to Old 99. Now, there's a well-known saying that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And thus, and therefore, you can see that in the last month or two, some developers and the city of Olympia have proposed a Highway 99 building in downtown Olympia. So, so our serve has been matched, and it's time to up our game. And that's where we go with the rest of the presentation you see tonight. So our story in Tumwater relative to historic trails and roads begins with George Bush. Not George Washington Bush, as I understand, was recently acknowledged in the statute passed by the most recent legislative session, but our one and only George Bush, the signal, again, pioneer with Michael T. Simmons and others, that established the seed of what became modern Tumwater in 1845. The story probably needs no elaboration. Just briefly, I will say, the very reason for this initial settlement is that as an African American, this being 15 years before the Civil War, the settlers in what was then Oregon Territory had passed a bill or resolution or law that did not allow African Americans to settle there. So Bush and his friends basically decided, fine, if you don't want us, we'll go somewhere else. And they ventured north of the Columbia River, which was outside the jurisdiction of the provisional government of Oregon. And they founded Newmarket, which again was the seed of the modern city of Tumwater. They got here by way of the Cowlitz Trail, as it's commonly referred to historiographically. Now, I present this slide because the documentation that you're about to see is based on the whole series of township plat maps, which the Government Land Office prepared in the early 1850s, which was effectively the carving up of the public domain, which the federal government did not yet own because they hadn't secured title from the various tribes in what was then Washington Territory. But they started piecing out the territory by these 6 mile square township plat maps. This one is, referring to my own note here, this is township number 18 North Range, 2 west of the Willamette Meridian. The originating point of all of these surveys being on the West Hills of downtown Portland at the foot of them. This was the 6 mile square township plat for what is the city of Olympia, which I'm going to try to show with my cursor, which I can't seem to get to work. So is it on? Oh, there it is. I'm trying to get my cursor.
There it is.
There it is, finally. So can you see where my cursor is pointing? That is, that was Olympia in 1853. 3 streets wide, 8 streets long, vertically running north to south. Tumwater, of course, is to the south of it, this is the very tip of Budd Inlet, as then construed. This is the falls. There's the sawmill. But also of note on this map, you can see coming in here a denotation of the Cowlitz Trail coming into the settlement community. Let's go to the next slide. So if you piece all of those maps together, you can extract from it the specific township range meets and bounds of that original trail. And what Dave Welch, who I source here, a member of the Oregon-California Trail Association, and they'll come back into play. What he has done is overlain the Oregon Trail data, which is the yellow line shadowing the black line, juxtaposed against the auto tour route, which is historic Highway 99 coming in at the south end of the city. It quickly passes by, well, thanks, Darlene. So you did that one step too early, but that's okay. We've got a jumpy computer here, folks. There was a lot of testimony here of late about how the Davis Meeker oak tree on Highway 99 was a landmark on the Cowlitz/Oregon Trail. And the next slide will give you the proof of that fact. It wasn't merely lore, it wasn't legend. By going to the Dave Welch map, you can see that just where the oak tree is located here, the trail kind of diverged. They directly over, this is the Olympia Airport to the left and the west, directly adjacent to the airport. The Cowlitz/Oregon Trail ran precisely atop the modern configuration of Highway 99. But notice that here about—
Mayor, can I ask a question?
Mayor,
Yes, did you want to take questions?
I think it might be better to take them as we go along than to save them, so yes.
Okay, Councilmember Agabi, go ahead.
So, Mr. McHenry, you have said this before, and I attempt to make a correction. So I think you're mixing two oranges here. When you say the Oregon Trail and the Cowlitz Trail, those are two separate trails. The Oregon Trail did not come up north. Lewis and Clark did not come up north. They went on the Columbia River and stopped in Astoria and back to Missouri.
That is correct. That is correct. I don't, and that's an important distinction, and it forms an important part, in fact, perhaps the crux of this presentation, because a case can be made, and a case is in the process of being made, that the Cowlitz Trail segment of the dozens of segments of the Oregon Trail should be added to the National Oregon Historic Trail System. And that is in some measure, Councilmember Agabi, what this project is intended to help accomplish, because this route segment is certainly as worthy as many segments that are already a part of the National Oregon Historic Trail, which by common understanding and statute presently ends in Oregon City, but in fact, as betokened by the account I began with, settlers in the Oregon Trail era continued overland to the shores of Puget Sound to establish Tumwater. So you are right. I thank you for highlighting it, but I would like to come back to this proposition later in my presentation. So you'll see here, interestingly, I think interestingly, that by the airport, by the oak tree here, the trail, the original trail, diverged and basically followed the route of Bonnywood Drive past the backside of Peter G. Schmidt School here. I'm sorry, we're having an emergency response call here. Okay. So the trail continued, as opposed to Highway 99, which ran directly adjacent to the airport and then north. The trail followed a route that tracks along what is now modern Bonnywood Drive. As we proceed north, you can see where the Highway 99's in red. This is a geography everyone's familiar with. Down here in the lower right, and for the life of me, I don't know why this cursor disappears. It's frustrating. There it is. In the lower right is Peter G. Schmidt School, and the trail comes into Tumwater to the east or to the right of Peter G. Schmidt. Is there another way of helping? is the fact that your cursor is on, is that affecting my ability to move a cursor? I don't know why it's so helter skelter.
Do you want a
What-
mouse pad?
Would a pad help?
Try maybe on a piece of paper.
I've got one.
Sorry, folks.
Is your- can we just use your cursor? Can we- Does that work?
Try this one.
Let's go with this then. No, it is, no, it is. Would that work better? This one, you see it?
Yeah, that's a little bit bigger, might
Yeah.
work better. Do I have to press a button?
No.
Boy, this is skid.
There it is.
Okay, there we are. So the cursor is pointing at Peter G. Schmidt School. The trail came into Tumwater proper to the east of the school. Here's Highway 99 over here. And the trail proceeded past Trosper Road, which is here. I'll come back to this digression over to the Bush grave site. But the trail proceeded into Tumwater. This map is a little deceptive. It actually went to the west of I-5, over here towards Michael T. Simmons. Mr. Welch and I have discussed this. The actual alignment was closer to this of Second Avenue on the west side of the freeway,
So-
until such time as it proceeded back down into the Falls area, which of course was the principal element of the founding colony of Newmarket. Now, just to go
Hey,
back,
Dave, we are actually not seeing your cursor now. Sorry, I just thought I would let you know.
yeah. We'll just go back, try to go back to the old one.
Yeah, we can see that one.
Well, I'm glad you can see it, Mayor, because I can't. And I don't know what to do to remediate this issue.
Well, I think you can just go ahead and I think we can.
Okay, here we are. So
There we
here's,
go, there we
so,
go.
so, yeah, that helps a lot, Chuck. Thank you. We doused the lights here, so that helps a lot. So this is Trosper Road. And so Dave Welch on his auto tour proposed, just pointed out that here's where George and Isabella Bush are buried, over at the old Pioneer Cemetery across the street from Costco. So I'll come back to this notion later. Let's go to the next slide, Darlene. So again, the trail ended at where the Cowlitz Trail met Salt Water in what's now Tumwater Falls Park. There was the Warden Hayes Sawmill was among many pioneer establishments in this vicinity, including Crosby's Flour Mill, Michael T. Simmons's Lumber Mill. This is a geography everyone should be quite familiar with. So let's go to the next slide. So in the 1850s, a bridge was finally built across the Deschutes River, about where the lower Boston Street Bridge is now, that does that zigzag by the brewery property. The Falls Terrace Restaurant would be off to the far side on the right of the bridge here. This is looking to the south. I'm sorry, this is looking from the Falls Terrace side northeast to where the bridge crossed over to what would become the road to Olympia over time. Here you can see the narrow gauge railway that ran on the west side of the River Canyon there. Let's go to the next slide. So back to the point that Councilmember Agabi raised so adroitly. The historicity of the Tumwater, that is to say, Cowlitz Trail segment of the Oregon Trail, is so now well established that a federal study conducted by the National Park Service has recommended its inclusion in the National Historic Trail for the Oregon Trail system. But this is a complicated, sometimes almost intractable process that requires literally an act of Congress to amend the National Trail. Congress of late, maybe to state the obvious, has had trouble focusing on a lot of issues. This happens to be one of them, but it's on the National Park Service agenda to get the Cowlitz Trail segment, among a dozen others, added to the National Historic Trail System under the Oregon Trail rubric. At such time as if and when that congressional enactment takes place, this is how the College Trail segment of the Oregon Trail would be designated along the I-5 corridor north of Vancouver, Washington, through Cowlitz County, through Lewis County, through Thurston County to Tumwater. But since we can't recognize this historic trail until such time as Congress gets around to doing it, meantime, public memory of local history continues to fade. And so I propose an interim alternative process of recognition. So how do we do that? So the next slide would be an image many of you would be familiar with. Now, what's to follow is just simply a placeholder idea. This is not a diehard commitment on my part. I just need a visual placeholder to identify the prospect that we need an iconographic image to denote a historic trail, since we can't use the federal insignia. So my idea, again, I'm not beholden to it, but my idea is to amend and adjust this former logo of the city, which of course is an icon based upon this same pioneer Oregon Trail era iconography. That's its root stock, of self-evidently, is to amend this icon in the following fashion: by stating the obvious, making note of the fact that the principal pioneer who came overland to what's now Tumwater in 1845 was an African-American man, George Bush. And he had with him, his was an interracial couple. He and Isabella had 4 or 5 sons, I can't remember exactly. And that's why the city's old icon had a young girl in the image, but that would be inappropriate if we were going to adapt it for present purposes. So this is a notion, it's an idea, it's meant to get the conversation started, which is to reapply the old city logo in the fashion that I've described up to this point. So how and where would we do that? So we'll go to the next slide. So here again are Dave Welch's maps. We're now looking at the south gate of the city where the historic Highway 99 sign was placed. And I would propose on the very same signpost to put the College Trail logo there. As you get closer to the airport by the oak tree, put perhaps a College Trail icon on either side of the oak tree as such, right there by the airport, one going northbound, one going southbound. Proceeding north, we would go back one, we would put one there. I would propose on the east side of Peter G. Schmidt School, because that's where the trail was. Is that Bonniewood? What is the name of that? It is Bonniewood there. So I propose to put signs on either direction on Bonniewood, and then we put some more signs along 2nd Avenue, right by Michael T. Simmons, because as I said earlier, I'm going to try to move the cursor up there to the north part of the image. God help me, I'll be able to do it right here. The trail went on 2nd Avenue, right by Michael T. Simmons, another Tumwater Elementary School, named after Bush's co-pioneer. And then if we go to the next slide, back to the east side of the freeway, we put a couple of signs down there in Tumwater Falls Park. So that's how we would potentially mark the College Trail segment of the Oregon Trail. But that, of course, is just the beginning by virtue of the fact that this whole project started with the Highway 99 sequence. So let's continue forward in time. When the Washington State Historical Society, my former organization, and the local Pioneer Association dedicated the Oregon Trail Monument, and I think it actually goes by that title, in 1914, one of the dedicatory speakers was General Hazard Stevens, the son of Washington Territory's first governor, Isaac Stevens. And as a young boy of 8, 9, 10, 12, he traveled the Cowlitz Trail north and south with his father on one mission or another. And as one of the keynote speakers, as reported by the Daily Olympian on the occasion of the dedication of that monument, which I should add has since been moved to inside the Brewery Falls Park from its original location, which was closer to the Crosby House and the brewmaster's house. This is quoting from the Olympian. He says, the old trail runs practically along the present Pacific Highway. So this is how, and not coincidentally, the earlier map I showed you shows the Pacific Highway, which later became Highway 99, running right along the Oregon Trail, which research David Welch has since documented. So there was no great signage for the Pacific Highway from 1913 to 1923. This is when automobiles are first being licensed. There's only maybe 200 or 300 automobiles very early on in this period. But by the 1920s, the volume of traffic is increasing such that the Washington State Legislature created a system of state highways, starting with and including State Road 1 in 1923. As this slide indicates, the state numeric typology preceded the federal highway numbering system, as in the case of US 99, so that the road from Vancouver through Thurston County, ultimately up to Blaine and the Canadian border, its original numeric designation was State Road 1. In 1927, when the federal highway system was created, parts of State Road 1 were overlaid with what we now know conventionally as US Highway 99 or Old Highway 99. The image on the right, by the way, is from a Metzger map from the 1920s. Next slide, please, Darlene. This is what that signage looked like. So Washington 1, it's not much unlike the current icon that you see on 509, 534, Route 18. They all have the silhouetted profile of George Washington with a number. They were slightly different, as you can see from this historic image, which through Darlene's help, I was able to grab off the internet. So I propose, I should say, your city's Historic Preservation Committee proposes that in addition to the Highway 99 signs that have been installed, or the College Trail segment signage, which we have just discussed, we also do an overlay of primary State Highway 1 signs in the following fashion, in the fashion previously described. So I want to take some time here now. This is also a Metzger map. Please, cursor. Don't know why this happens. Okay, I'm just going to have to describe it verbally. I apologize. This would have been so much better in person, I dare say. That's an editorial comment from a citizen. Take it for what it's worth. At the very bottom, down by Girth, John McAleer, that is the approximate alignment of Trosper Road before Trosper Road was built. This is from the 1920s. To the left, over there between Small Trace or E.M. Kent, you can see what was then the early intimation of the Little Rock Highway. Coming there, there's my cursor suddenly appeared. This is the Little Rock Highway coming down here. I guess this is Trosper Road right here. Here's Little Rock Highway. Here is, in the 1920s, State Route 1 crossing over what's now Trosper Road, bending in a northwesterly direction over towards what's now the Michael T. Simmons neighborhood along 2nd Avenue before crossing back over the alignment now occupied by the freeway down into the Tumwater Falls Park, where you had this complicated zigzag system where you turned right going northbound over the Boston Street Bridge up to what's now Custer Way, where you took another right before you bent left ultimately towards Olympia points north. This was the alignment in 1922. If we go to our next slide, you'll see that that complicated twist and turn down by the Falls Terrace. Our computer is locked.
It's not advancing.
It's not advancing. Just when you think it can't get worse, it does. Throws up on us.
Yeah. See what,
There we go.
I had to wiggle, I tickle it a little bit.
So because of the complicated configuration of the Boston Street sequence in the 1930s using federal highway funds, the state highway department basically pulled the string tight and made now what's now the modern alignment of Old Highway 99, starting about where the Capitol 5000 building, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and Brewery City Pizza. So ran on a straight line over the river where it reconnected with Custer up here in the north. The old alignment of Highway 1 being here on to the west, as you see in that configuration. Now, this next slide shows perhaps more helpfully still. No, go back. This slide shows more hopefully still the juxtaposition of all of these roads. Now you can see the I-5 alignment has been imposed on the landscape unmistakably. You see here at the south end of the city, the new old 99 alignment running to the east of I-5 till it crosses the river and then meets up there at Custer. But notice from this, here's the highway interchange. Notice how, however, and this Metzger map shows it most graphically, that as Highway 99 proceeded north, you can see the remnant of the historic alignment where it crossed over to a configuration west of I-5, right by the Simmons Elementary School, until it crossed back over and down into the park. This, I think, is the most graphic evidence of the path of historic State Route 1. So if we now go to, this is a historic photograph that also is probative. This photograph seems to have been taken about 1955. The freeway has been built, but there's no traffic on it. You can see Trosper Road interchange built right in the center. This is a view looking to the south generally. The airport is in the upper left. Now, I'm not putting too sharp a point on it, but if you look in this photograph way in the upper left, you can see a visual manifestation of the oak tree that right there by the airport. But notice more particularly, Bonnywood Drive, you can see the configuration where Bonnywood Drive diverges here by the oak tree. And this is the alignment of the historic trail before it would have otherwise met up with the new Highway 99 right by the highways building there that is not presently under consideration for redevelopment. But more particularly still, ladies and gentlemen, you can see by the alignment of 99 as it comes in from the south, you can see this is a remnant of the old 99 before it was redirected on the route east of I-5. You can see it actually crossed over to the 2nd Avenue side, but when the freeway was built, this link was cut and all you were left with was just the new alignment here to the east of the freeway. So if we go then to the next slide, question becomes, how do we recognize historic Route 1? I propose that we use the same, the federal federal highway manual has a style. It's the brown sign. I propose that we call it Historic Route 1, also with a subtext of Pacific Highway. And 1M that you see here on the right would be applied to the Little Rock Highway, because before the state highway system created three-digit derivations of 1- and 2-digit highways, the subsidiary roads were given a letter designation. So what's now Little Rock, which was an alternate to State Route 1, was called State Route 1M. And so with the next slide, I propose to put State Route 1 signs on the west side of the freeway along 2nd Avenue by Michael T. Simmons School. And also, as you can see down here to the south, 1M signs down Little Rock Road, terminating at the Bush grave site there in the old Pioneer Cemetery. So one might be content there, but Tumwater has a very distinguished highway history, because in addition to being the Pioneer Trail, in addition to being the home to the Pacific Highway, in addition to being one of the destinations on the original State Route 1 or Federal Highway 99, it also has the honor of being the beginning of US 101. And it starts right here on Deschutes Parkway, just uphill from the Brewmaster House and the Crosby House. When you get on 101 north there, heading to Shelton or to the coast, as it may be, you are beginning, that is the beginning of US 101. It's 1,535 miles to Los Angeles. Now, you might think this is a quixotic notion, but if drawing attention to Tumwater and building our tourism infrastructure is at all important to us, I can attest to the fact that road enthusiasts from all over the country, indeed all over the world, go out of their way to find spots all over this great country where one and such road begins or ends. And this one, 101, southbound, begins in Tumwater. Of course, conversely, it's also the end of 101, which is a junction we're all quite familiar with, DeSoto Canyon coming down the road. The old City Hall is straight ahead. I would propose that we put an end to US 101 somewhere in this corridor, maybe this side of the stop sign, maybe on the far side as one approaches Old City Hall. But it's something, again, as the ultimate recommendation suggests, to bring forward for further development and perhaps implementation as well. And then, if that wasn't grand enough to conclude, I was on vacation about a decade ago up on Vancouver Island when I stumbled upon this monument where the 50th parallel transected this trail in Campbell River, British Columbia. Now, any and all travelers in our region are intimately familiar, or they should be, or maybe not. Maybe I'm just speaking out of turn. But because I go to Corvallis a lot, in fact, I'll be going there Friday for baseball, I passed a sign in Salem, Oregon that says 45th parallel, halfway between the equator and the North Pole, which is a much commented upon sign. Indeed, the late, great Bill Walton, who died a year ago today, when I met with him about 18 months ago, we were talking, he used to read my books, but he was fascinated by this sign in Salem that said 45th parallel, halfway to the North Pole. So my idea, I got an idea, therefore, and 50 isn't perhaps as grand, I mean, it's a larger number, but halfway is a big deal. But anyway, other jurisdictions are marking or denoting where significant parallels transect their community, as in this case, Campbell River. So I got the idea, to conclude with our last slide, which we seem to have lost. Why not denote the fact that the 47th parallel directly transects Tumwater? In fact, ladies and gentlemen, the 47th parallel of north latitude runs directly down the middle of Trosper Road. I don't mean the fog line to the right, to the north, or the fog line to the left, to the south, I mean, right down the middle of Trosper Road. That's probably a coincidence, but this has been verified. Chuck can attest to it. We've done it scientifically. The 47th parallel runs right down the center of Trosper Road. So I propose in conclusion that we post a monument in one of those, in that one of the several magnificent traffic circles that the city, to its great credit and genius, has built on the Trosper Road route, that we put a 47th parallel monument. It could be sponsored by Tumwater Rotary or otherwise, but I propose we put up a monument that denotes the fact that the 47th parallel, slightly more than halfway between the equator and the North Pole, is here in Tumwater. And I think that is our last slide, is it not, Darlene? So I'm out of breath and mentally exhausted. I appreciate the time and the attention. If there are any further questions, I'd be happy to address them. But again, I might be the spokesperson. This work item might have been my idea, but in fact, it comes with the full endorsement of the city's Historic Preservation Commission. And I look forward to working with the council. We will look forward to working with the council, the city staff, and not merely Chuck, because as we learned with the Highway 99 project, because this transcends the boundaries of Chuck's portfolio, we need the active encouragement and involvement of the city, city roads and highway department to transact this work item of the Historical Commission. Thank you.
I see a hand up, Councilmember Dahlhoff.
Thank you, Mayor. Just big kudos to the Historic Preservation Commission and to Dave Nicandri. I am personally a big fan, and I'm in full support of this idea about places and spaces because it opens up the conversation for other stories, right? For Cowlitz, for Nisqually, for Squaxin, other stories. So I love this opening. And if we talk about where we're going, we have to remember where we came from. So I love this idea and I am in full support. And thank you, Dave, for that presentation.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jefferson?
Yes, Dave, to you, the Historic Commission, and also to Darlene, great work. I love this. I appreciate it. It's timely, it's appropriate, and it's needed. And recently, I had a meeting with the mayor and attended with Dr. Jackson. And I say it's appropriate because she was asked a question about inclusivity and for us as we move towards an equity committee. And Dr. Jackson said, you know what, Tumwater, you have a unique history. You have a beautiful, welcoming space. Let it be known and tell that history proudly. So this is so appropriate. And thank you. I endorse this 100% and I fully support it. Thank you again to you and your team.
Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Kathy?
Hi, Dave.
Hi, Joan.
Yay, this is exciting. And I'm thinking of all the signs in the way that, because I was raised in California and how well they've marked some of their roads and the special things. And people will talk about their trips to areas based on what they read on the roads and the highways. And this is just another one of your great ideas. I have been known to say you have some crazy ones, but this is a really good one, and I say amen to both what Lietta said and Angela said. It's really great. So heave ho, and let's keep going. Let's figure this out. And the other thing I wanted to say or ask you about is where and why, in some of your looking at things, do they call the area Trails End? What trail is that, or is that a trail, or is that a way that a different group came in, or?
Well, I'm old enough, and in fact, if I might just digress for a second, I was at the car show over by Jim Brown Park on Sunday, which is a nice community event. And I overhear somebody say, who was Jim Brown? And I almost smacked my forehead because Councilmember Kathy, that very moment speaks so forcefully to how quickly important people, let alone average people, but people important to a city are so quickly forgotten. So I was regaling this, and who was well-intentioned. I didn't get upset. I just said, I said, I've lived in this town long enough. I knew that guy. Much of the history I've told you tonight, I learned from, it was Jim who first pointed out to me in the 1970s, half a century ago, that little stub of the segment of Highway 99 before the freeway was built. Jim was the one who pointed out to me, that's the way the highway used to go before the freeway cut the town in half. Taking it over by Michael T. Simmons. So as I say, I got into such a fervent digression, Councilmember Kathy.
It's
I've
okay.
forgotten what your question was, but what did you want me to address?
My question was, and thank you for the digression. I love it when you get all worked up if it's something I believe in. I asked you, what did another trail or another group or something come out in the area called Trails End?
No, the Trails End clearly draws its name from the juxtaposition of the history of the Cowlitz Trail, which I've shared with you here tonight, because it was commonly averred in the 1970s. There was an old painting. I don't know what happened. When I was on council, again, elected in 1976, I want the younger members of the council to reflect on that for a second. When I was elected in 1976, there was a painting of the whole party coming across some kind of hill. And so this was all kind of a lived memory at that time. We've lost a little sight of it, but unquestionably Trails End, that commercial development out here off to the east of where I'm sitting, that drew its name from the very same juxtaposition of historical facts that I've outlined here in this presentation.
Okay.
Tumwater was the end of the trail.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. How long have you been working on this? Off and on all your life here?
Well, this is an idea. Yeah, I've been kicking this around for a couple of decades now. But I got off into this weird digression on thinking fireworks were important. And that
You want to talk about those again? Oh, golly. It says in the minutes that you said a nasty word about me, but it's okay.
that can't possibly be true.
No, we're not going to do our minutes that way anyway now, so no one will look it up. Don't worry about it. I'm not worried about it.
That was a mea culpa on my part. I didn't mean to dredge up old policy disputes, only to say I got distracted by more ephemeral items, the enduring importance of the community's founding.
Absolutely. I understand. I understand. I'm so glad we're friends. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, Councilmember Agabi.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. McKenzie, thank you very much for indulging me in my little poetry about the Oregon Trail. I really appreciate that. So the 47th parallel, I think that is a great idea. And I'm saying that we're not living in an age where we have a lot of people that don't know anything and wouldn't learn anything because they just don't want to learn anything. So if you drive through Tumwater and you see a sign that says 47 parallel, I want you to think, what does that mean? If you're not a student of geography, at least you ought to go home and Google, what does that mean? That means you're getting close to the equator. So many, many years ago, I was in a conversation with somebody and I said 1400 GMT. And that person said, oh, you mean military time? I said, no, that is Greenwich Mean Time. So what is that? When I use this is an adult. So it is this little things that for the moment we want people to come to Tumwater. Not only would they get an education, we want the synapses to keep firing to say, well, you know, I drove to Tumwater and it says 47 parallel. What does that mean? So thank you for this idea. It's a very, very good idea.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Agabe, I'm glad you brought this up because it allows me to elaborate on kind of the underlying philosophy and value of this, which you perfectly hit upon, which is the reason why I like historic projects like this is that it's what I call readily accessible history, or in the case of the 47th parallel, readily accessible geographic teaching. And that is, there's no ongoing staffing. There's nothing that needs to be insured. There's really no maintenance. Maybe once every 50 years, you need to clean the sign. But I mean, what I find particularly appealing about the idea is that when parents are taking their kids to Peter G. Schmidt School or Michael T. Simmons School, they're driving to school and they see this sign and they say, Mom or Dad, what does that mean? College Trail, why is that Highway 1 sign here? And it's an educational moment that is so economically achieved in comparison to other alternatives, writing books, building museums. I've done all of those, trust me. But this is my favorite form, Councilmember Agabe. At this point in my life, this is my favorite form of historical interpretation because it's readily accessible history and or geography.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Swarthout.
Thank you, Dave. This is amazing. This really is. I love history and I could listen to you talk about our history. This is just amazing. I love the idea of the 47th parallel. It's funny that I was talking with somebody the other day about like naming high schools and naming places that the people that they've been named after, people don't know who they are anymore. And so, and how they're still like, I still know who they are. Like, you know, you had experience with Jim Brown and it's just hard. And so that's what I was wondering when we were doing the sesquicentennial project, that we had like story maps, or we had that people could go to. And so I don't know the use of like QR codes, if that's something that could be put on some, or have we used that so you could do a QR code? We were talking about putting one on. We're redoing the monument for the marathon, the women's marathon down at Marathon Park. And so we're talking about putting a code on it so that it links to the Washington, the legislative, the ledge.wa.gov, so you could look at it, information there. So I don't know if that's something that could be done on these signs, so people, you know, if they do stop, could do that, or I guess they could just Google it too. I
like that idea because that would be the most economical and accessible way of conveying the level of historic or geographical information that I was able to convey verbally to several of you here tonight, that the typical traveler wouldn't. I mean, with sufficient prompting, they might explore it. But I love the idea at maybe the gateway to the north and south point of the city. There's another sign that's like QR code that links you to a website that might have 100, 200, 300 words on each of these themes, where the whole litany can be laid out. And you know, I want to address a point that Councilmember Jefferson raised earlier, and it's important to me. I mean, I've been all over. I've seen historic signs from one part of the country to the other. And given our country's troubled history in terms of race relations, aside and apart from the workability of the image I suggested, the idea of iconography that shows an interracial couple, to me, is very powerful testimony to this community's place in not only local history, state history, but national history. Because in my more grandiose moments, I've actually to go. Hopefully, I've finally been able to put Councilmember Agabe's mind at rest about the Oregon trip. But I have an even grander idea I think a case can be made that in partnership with the city of Olympia, we could add Tumwater and Olympia to the National Civil Rights Trail, because we've got the Bush, George Isabella Bush story. Olympia's got the, oh, pardon me, I've forgotten his name, but Olympia's part of the Underground Railroad.
They used to what they one of the slaves that was in Olympia.
Yeah, they took him to
out.
Victoria. They took him to Victoria.
Yeah, he got
So-
out. Railroad.
So if you think this is grandiose, we can even go beyond to Councilmember Dahlhaus' point about this is just being the start. This is just simply the immediate potential that comes to mind, which is adding these communities as maybe adjunct locations on the National Civil Rights Historic Trail, which is commonly thought of as Selma to Montgomery, Alabama, and some other places around the country. But we fit in that history every bit as much as some of those places do.
Thank you. Councilmember Von Holtz.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, Dave, Councilmember Dahlhoff and I got a sneak peek at this because we were at that historical commission meeting where you first shared this with everybody, and I loved it then and I love it now. And so thank you very much for the presentation, and you have my full support.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? All right, so this is so I just want to get clarification, Chuck. This is just a presentation, and then there'll be more specific things that'll be coming later.
Yeah, we'll continue to refine this. We'll work with Brandon and the transportation staff to get their input on placement and how that signage might work out. And of course, there's other issues with that and transportation and confusion and where signs are properly placed and how they're put together. So there's some stuff like that to work with. Also, I think the funding for the trail and the highway signs is within the Historical Commission budget currently. Certainly the 47th parallel monument is far beyond what we have budgeted for right now. Dave has talked with the Rotary Club and some other groups in the city, and I think that will continue as we look at different ways to possibly fund that. So I would imagine at some point as that 47th parallel project moves forward, we'll come back to you and let you know an overall cost and a location on Trosper and a funding mechanism, or possibly a couple different funding mechanisms to consider.
Great. All right, this is exciting. Good to have this more information on this in the future as this unfolds. So,
okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
thank you. All right, our next item is the Brewery Redevelopment Planned Action Environmental Impact Statement, and I will go to City Administrator Parks.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members. It's nice to see you all today. I am going to be turning this over to Kelly here just in a minute. We're going to be tag teaming this, but we wanted to come to the council and give you an update on the ongoing work that we have been performing over the last couple of years on the environmental contamination that exists on our different brownfield sites here in Tumwater. So Kelly is going to give you an update on that. But we're also wanting to update and introduce you to what is essentially the next phase of this project, which is going to be kicking off here very shortly. And that is the Planned Action EIS project that will help to kind of coalesce all these different strings and parts and pieces and begin to pull them together to develop help us develop a strategy for moving forward with redevelopment of the overall brewery site. In advance of that, however, we've been working on perfecting a community outreach program around brownfield redevelopment in Tumwater more generally, but then also in preparation for being able to talk to the community about this Planned Action EIS process. So bringing Kelly on board has really expanded our resources, and I'm going to be sharing my screen, but she's going to be doing the first half of this presentation. So a bit of grace as we are coordinating that strategy. But Kelly, I'm going to turn it over to you, and hopefully this will work.
Thank you, Administrator Parks, and good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm so excited to have my first conversation with you tonight in this role. And so I thought that it would be really helpful to share with you the presentation that I am giving to community members and community groups. I want to educate, I want to share information, and I want to share the good work that has been going on for years in Tumwater. I am so fortunate to step in the process at this moment when things are finally starting to move forward visually. So next slide, please. So whenever I'm talking to a group, I like to talk about my bias and what my perspective is in this work. And in this brownfield redevelopment work, I am speaking because I'm leading the economic development efforts here at the city, but I am a public servant. Some might call me a bureaucrat, and that determines what my tools and resources are. So the fixes and the resources that I'm bringing to brownfield redevelopment are not to compete with developers. It's not to compete with a community vision. It's to bring things together and to take down some of the regulatory barriers to redeveloping these sites. And so what are brownfields? For the benefit of the public and anybody watching, I know this council is very well versed in this, but brownfields are properties with real or perceived contamination. Their past uses make them a bit tricky to develop, and it's an uncertainty. The uncertainty that developers are not really willing to take on because they're not sure if they're going to see a return on investment or if that property is going to move in the way that they intended. And so the next slide shows some of these typical historical sites. So in their past lives, brownfields had industrial uses. They were dry cleaners, motor pools, auto repair shops, landfills, and so much more. So this is the process. I've been here for about 30, 60, 90 days now, and this is my everyday. So this is the process that I am following. I am trying to identify and inventory these opportunity sites. I call them opportunity sites because we're taking something that was a liability and looking for the opportunity for the community in it. I am engaging with regulators, so that is daily work with EPA and Department of Ecology. I recently attended a brownfields conference in Yakima to get best practices from other cities in their big brownfields projects. Reuse planning. So Lisa is going to speak to this in a bigger way in her presentation, but that's working with the community, working with our planning team. It's aligned with our comprehensive planning. What should we do? How should we reuse this property? And the environmental site assessments. So we do 2 phases of environmental site assessment to tell us what kind of contaminants are on the site and how much there are there. So phase 1 is really research. It's historical research. It's interviews with former workers, former owners, looking at aerial photography, really trying to figure out, is there suspected contamination here? How reliable is that? And where should we focus future testing if there is a finding? And then phase 2 is the soil and groundwater investigation. And then there's remediation planning, which again, I'm going to put a bookmark in that for Lisa a little bit later. So what does success look like? We understand the contamination. We understand what it is and how much there is. We have a cleanup plan and a cost estimate that gives us that certainty for our community and for developers. Our community helps vision the redevelopment. I'm in a very lucky position. I've come into this work when you have so much community input that has already been gathered. And there will be other mechanisms for input from groups. Lisa will talk about that a little bit later. We can leverage additional funding, and this is the special superpower of local government in the process. Private industry can't access the cleanup grants that governments can. And so cleanup grants, that money is what we can bring to the table once we've done our due diligence. And then positioning ourselves for those cleanup grants. And then the benefits. We're facilitating job growth. We're reducing nuisance properties. We're improving and protecting the environment. We are facilitating private investment, and all of these factors work together to improve public services through creating a stronger tax base. And so these are the two resources, the two primary resources that I have been focused on in my work. And that is the Integrated Planning Grant from the Department of Ecology and the Community-Wide Assessment Grant from the EPA. And I'm sure that you have heard that these are split between two distinct efforts. So the Integrated Planning Grant, the IPG, is really focused on helping us perform the due diligence tasks at the former WashDOT Olympic Region headquarters site, while the EPA grant is really helping us to focus on our larger sites at the brewery. Next slide. And so the deliverables, I just think these are important to share because it shares sort of the different focuses of these two grants. So for ecology, we're really focusing on one site, a phase 1 and a phase 2 assessment on one site, doing a work plan and a feasibility study so that the city can better understand if that is a property that it should, could, or would take on. And then the community-wide assessment grant, it's really community-wide. So we're looking at building an inventory of these opportunity sites, maybe finding some willing and eager property owners who would like to have phase 1s completed. For this grant, we need to do 15 phase 1s and 10 phase 2s. And the spoiler alert is that the first 2 phase 1s and phase 2s are the 2 brewery sites. And then coming up with 5 specific cleanup plans and doing community outreach. And so I want to share with you our top 3 sites. These are our opportunity sites. So when we're talking about the opportunity sites, we're really trying to focus on those areas where you as a council have focused on planning sub areas, right? Land use and transportation planning areas. So this is really looking at what the economic conditions are, the infrastructure. And when I'm speaking to groups in the public, I'm really trying to educate them and funnel them to these plans. Because for most people who ask, what's going on with the brewery? What's going on with Capitol? You know, they don't know that the plans even exist. So this is a really helpful way to get people engaged and involved in reading your good work. And so these plans, if you go to the next slide, directly feed into, of course, your municipal code, your design and development standards that are featured in these 2 code chapters. And this is really helpful when I am speaking with developers and speaking with people in the real estate industry to show them that the recipe is here for what could go there. It helps to simplify that process. Next slide. And so our priority sites. The first one is the Knoll site of the former Olympia Brewery. And so the good news on this site, as far as a progress report, is that the drilling and testing of phase 2 happened last week. And so we are finally beyond phase 1 and phase 2 actual sampling has occurred. And so we should know by the end of the summer what those contaminants are.
I have a question. How many phases are there, Kelly?
2.
Okay.
2 phases. So we did 1 and we did 2. So that's the good news. Next, we have the Valley site of the former Olympia Brewery. So this has had a phase 1 completed. And so we should know soon the schedule on phase 2. The focus was really on the Knoll site for right now. And then third, and this is our most progress, good news story, is the former WashDOT Olympic Region headquarters. So this site began testing today. And so phase 2 has begun this week. And we've been actively collaborating with WashDOT staff, with their environmental engineers who are called Enviro Engineers, I believe. So it does what it says on the tin. And so we have been splitting the workload of the environmental assessment and working together to make sure that the end result is a good, complete analysis of conditions on this site. So, summary of what's happening now, phase 2 at the Knoll site. So thank you to those in the community who dealt with a little bit of traffic holdup while we did that sampling. Subsurface investigation at the former WashDOT site. So that is happening this week. We are working with WashDOT on their site, helping to assist with demolition permits when that's appropriate. They want to demolish first 2 buildings on the site, and that was discussed at an earlier work session. I am actively doing community outreach. So if there are specific groups that you would like me to talk to, I am happy to do so. I'm also collecting questions during those community outreach sessions and putting together emails about a week later because I need to talk to planners and permit techs and different experts to get these groups the information that they need. And then doing more grant writing and outreach. And Lisa is going to speak to the next part, which is the planned action environmental impact statement.
Okay, well, I appreciate having Kelly on board. She has been jumped in with both feet into a pretty complex set of circumstances, and I really appreciate the resource and the energy that she's brought to this. And I've really appreciated her ability to reach out to the community and begin that process in terms of coordinating and educating people about what's happening in our community with these different sites. So we are making great progress on sort of the first step, which was we need to understand what the environmental contamination is that we might be dealing with. But then the next steps, again, are to engage in this community outreach, both about brownfield redevelopment generally and how that can be a real positive economic development strategy for the city of Tumwater, but then also specifically reaching out and helping people understand what's going on with those brewery properties in particular. And then the next thing that we are getting ready to embark upon that we wanted to make sure council was aware of before we get too far down the path is to begin work on the planned action environmental impact statement process that we have talked about before. That's going to be, it's a comprehensive strategy to try and bring together the various different processes and information that we've been gathering, as well as all of the various ideas for what could happen on that property, and pulling them all together to be able to understand what might the redevelopment of that property actually look like, and what might it take to actually get to that point. So we'll be talking about, we'll be pulling in all of the environmental cleanup requirements, all of the information that we gain out of the phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessments, evaluating with the community and with our partners potential redevelopment alternatives. We can better understand, based on those alternatives, what some of the public infrastructure requirements are for specifically for the brewery sites and other places that might be redeveloped in this general area. And it allows us to do a detailed, comprehensive environmental review and analysis on a much more broad perspective. So essentially, what is planned action EIS? So this is a specific type of non-project planning level environmental impact statement that's authorized by the State Environmental Policy Act. And it's primarily available to cities and counties as the regulatory authority in land use regulatory authority in the different communities. It's a more detailed, comprehensive review that happens at a planning stage. And it looks at an entire geographic area as opposed to looking at individual environmental reviews that might happen in that same area for individual projects. So again, it's a defined geographic subarea that has a specifically defined development scenario. Different types of and intensities of development are identified. And then the impacts of that development, so those development scenarios are assessed, both the impacts on the built environment. So that includes what does it mean for the public water systems, the public sewer systems, our floodplain issues. What about our public services? And then it also evaluates the impact of those developments on the natural environment, including the Deschutes River, our water quality standards, those types of things. And then out of that evaluation, the thing that makes this type of an EIS a bit different is that the specific mitigation measures to address all of those different impacts that have been identified are developed, and then they are adopted into what's called a planned action ordinance. So they become an added layer of requirement for new development and future development that happens in that general area. So once this planned action EIS process is complete, any future projects that happen within that area that are consistent with the development scenarios and the types and intensities that were evaluated, and that incorporate the mitigation measures that are identified in the planned action ordinance, they don't have an additional separate individual SEPA review process required that they would have to go through at that individual project stage. So what are some of the benefits of this approach? So it really is a comprehensive versus a piecemeal environmental review. You're taking a larger geographic area, you're evaluating potential development that could happen throughout that area, as opposed to individual projects happening on smaller properties trying to evaluate impact. So it's much more comprehensive in terms of its review process. It is consistent with the triple bottom line economic development strategy that the City Council has adopted in our strategic goals and priorities, where we're actually looking at cleaning up the environment where it has been left in a contaminated state. And it also gets these properties back into a more productive economic use, which then provides jobs and helps to improve quality of life for the community and to contribute to taxes and funding of services that are necessary throughout the community. There is this approach that we're talking about is geared towards and focused on regional collaboration. The mayor and I, about a year and a half ago, met with Lieutenant Governor Denny Heck about this project. And one of the things that he said to us is that this isn't just a Tumwater issue, speaking specifically of the brewery properties, it's a state issue. For decades, that whole area was an iconic symbol of the state of Washington. And now for the past 2 decades, they've also been a blight on our entire community in the region. And so we want to ensure a collaborative approach with our regional partners across the community. And the planned action EIS process specifically allows us to do that. And we also want to keep in mind the different partnerships that could be available in terms of reuse of this property. So the EIS compares alternative development scenarios. And by looking at different partnerships, whether that's a partnership with the YMCA for some sort of an indoor recreation facility, or whether it's a partnership with the City of Olympia for an aquatic, a regional aquatic facility, this tool, this process allows us to focus on and develop those partnerships. The other direct benefit of a planned action EIS process is that there's increased predictability. So both for the community, because the community has identified and decided this is the activity, this is the use, the development that we expect in this area, but also here are the mitigation measures that we are assured are going to be put into place to address the potential impacts. But it also helps to increase predictability for developers and for the development community. And that is one of the main components of ensuring that there is an effective and cost-effective and efficient type of redevelopment as it's happening from the private sector's perspective. And then bottom line, because of the way this is organized and authorized under the state statutes, it's a much more efficient permitting process, particularly for those projects that are consistent with all of the evaluation and the development types and intensities that have been evaluated through this process. So our basic timeline for this the rest of this biennium for us going through to the end of calendar year 2026. So as I mentioned, the community engagement, that will be ongoing. Again, there are 2 tracks, essentially. There's the more general conversation about brownfield redevelopment in broader terms, but then specifically around the brewery redevelopment. And as we get farther along with the planned action EIS process, the specific types of outreach, community outreach, will be more well defined in that scope of work as we get farther down the road. But our community engagement is ongoing, and we intend to have that be a primary component of the work that we're doing moving forward. And then the planned action EIS, we have a draft scope of work right now from our consultant who's helping us with brownfield redevelopment. There is budget in the 2025-2026 biennial budget to help us with this work in particular. It will not fund the entire process. This can be a very costly process because it does such a detailed and in-depth review of existing conditions and potential impacts, as well as identifying solutions and mitigation measures. But it will help us get a long ways down the road with all of the early planning, helping us to identify the study area specifically, talk about the detailed scope of work from the consultant. It helps us form regional committees that we are intending to formulate to help us through this process. It helps us develop our communication plan. And then we will also be able to take all of the work that's happening in terms of the environmental characterization, which is the process of identifying and understanding what the environmental contamination is, but it also helps us to identify the necessary cleanup strategies to address that environmental contamination. And then funding strategy will also be a component of this. So we need to spend some money in these early stages and help us to identify some additional funding sources in order to help us move forward with the overall planning and the further work, the detailed work in the environmental impact statement. So that is our process as of now, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And I know Kelly is available as well if there are questions about where we are headed or what our next steps are.
Councilmember Swarthout.
Thank you for that presentation. We did a planned EIS for the Brew Tower, that area, and so that was my first experience doing this. So is there a timeline on that? Because we did that one. Does it expire? Does it have to be acted on, or what's the timeline?
I believe that it was done in 2015, and I believe in the case of most planned action EISs, they do expire.
Okay.
There has not been anything to date that's happened on that one. I think there may be some value in identifying the process of identifying our study area for this. There may be some benefits to evaluate whether or not it would be a good idea to pull that area that was previously part of a planned action EIS and incorporate it into the work that we're doing here. But that's something we'll definitely and look into.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Kathy.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say it was nice, even over Zoom like this, to meet Kelly. And I'm glad that she has that job description. That's a lot of stuff and many things we've talked about over the years. So it's exciting to see movement, even just discussion on some of these things. So I welcome her to Tumwater. I have several questions. One was the whole idea of these planned action things expiring. You know, how long after we do it is it still good, which we don't know yet. Is that right?
That's right. Generally, that's going to be one component of the establishing the extent of the study area and the evaluation. My experience has been there anywhere from 15 to 20 years or more, and they can then subsequently be updated as you make progress with planned action, with implementation of the planned action EIS projects.
I'm just thinking that, you know, this is a lot of good work and what needs to be done. And I think climate change is going to accelerate how long things like this are going to be good, and potential developers and folks are going to say, well, how is this now going to impact that? So I'm sure that that's taken into consideration when we're doing it, to look at what we need to do in light of that. The other thing is, I wonder how you're handling thought. I don't want to say the depression, but the thoughts of so much federal money that is being not only drying up, but just being hacked off and thrown away, especially as it has to do with environmental things. And
Yeah.
and so what do you do? Do you just proceed as normal, or do you make different adjustments? Because I think it's going to impact us somehow here.
Yeah, so as with most things that we have been tracking over the course of the last several months, we are tracking whether or not our EPA grant is on the chopping block or not. Currently, there is a multi-page spreadsheet of projects that are being targeted for not being funded any longer. And fortunately, right now, our brewery redevelopment project is not on that chopping block. But we will be keeping track of that very, very specifically. And I think in general, the good thing about brownfields and brownfield redevelopment is that the state of Washington has a very robust program developed and based on the Model Toxics Control Act, which was actually a citizens initiative that instituted back in the late 1980s. And it has a dedicated source of funding that's based on the importation of hazardous materials into the state of Washington. And so it's got a dedicated source of funding and is relatively reliable in terms of being available for these iterative brownfield redevelopment processes where you do planning and then you do more planning, and then eventually you're doing hopefully actual cleanup projects. So we will continue to charge forward. We do have a grant application to help us for $250,000. It's a Thriving Communities grant. It's a federally funded program that is administered through a third-party nonprofit organization, which is similar to the grant that we have that is funding our urban forester position and some other work in our sustainability arena. So again, we're tracking that. We have submitted the application. We may or may not get funded. And if we do get funded, we also will be very careful about expending the resources in a way that is affordable in case we don't get the reimbursement that might be promised from those sources. But again, long answer shortened, I guess. We have lots of resources other than federal to help us with the brownfield redevelopment process, specifically the planning work and then eventually the initial cleanup work in terms of actual construction projects.
That's good. No, that's it. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's a complete answer to what I was thinking about. One other quick thing I wanted to ask was, have you had any questions yet or whatever up from the neighborhood that is east of the DOT property do people in that neighborhood that's right up next to it there?
I do not believe we've had any specific conversations with any of the neighbors, but we also haven't had any specific outreach at this point on the DOT site. If there are concerns or if the council members have heard of concerns, I would encourage you to please let us know about those.
Okay.
And we're happy to talk to people and let them know kind of what we're doing to assist and to evaluate the options and alternatives moving forward at that DOT site. DOT has been very cooperative to work with at this point, and we're hopeful that whether or not it becomes a city community center site or some other site, we are hopeful that we'll be able to keep moving. And the idea would be to ensure that whatever DOT ends up doing on that site is consistent with what the city of Tumwater wants it to be, as expressed in the capital corridor plan that was adopted.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that. It was both of these reports were very, very informative, very helpful, timely. So
you're welcome.
Great, thank you. Any more questions? So it's great to have Kelly here. It's kind of filling in the gap that Austin had. So this really does help us move forward. So with that, we will move to Mayor City Administrator report, and I will start out with City Administrator Parks.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few quick things, council members. Our community engagement survey is going well. We already have approximately 100 responses just in the initial week of direct outreach. You can watch for more outreach coming in the next email. The Tumwater on Tap and both and Inside the City will both have links to the survey as we can continue that engagement. And thank you to those council members who've helped us get the word out. We are very grateful for that. Our goal is to try and get as much participation as possible in that survey work. Another quick reminder, final reminder, the Elevate Fair is this Saturday from 10 to 2 at the Osho Cultural Center. The water quality report, which we put out annually, is now printed, mailed, and being distributed throughout the city. So please keep your eye out for that. Parks is gearing up for the summer. They've got 8 different events and they are underway with all of the planning for those. Applications for participation in the 4th of July parade are open. If you have people or community groups that are interested in that, please direct them towards our Parks and Rec staff. And then Public Works Week last week was a great success, and the social media campaign actually was among the most engaged so far this year. So we were really happy with that. And then the last thing that I would like to do, Mayor, is I would like to publicly thank Mike Matlock for his decades of service to the city of Tumwater. This is his last week on the job. So excuse me, Mike's contributions to the existing high quality of life in this community have been long-standing and selflessly delivered. And we're going to miss his wisdom and knowledge as well as his dry sense of humor. So thank you, Mike. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you. And I might just add, Mike had 35 years of service with the city of Tumwater, which is absolutely amazing. And as we were meeting today, it was very interesting, you know, going back to a lot of the projects and things that have occurred, you know, between my planning commission, council, and my 22 years of being connected with the city of Tumwater. Yeah, there was just a lot of projects. So Councilmember Althauser.
Thanks, Mayor. I know this is the mayor's report, but I'd be remiss if I didn't also thank Mike for his public service to the city. I'm just sort of looking back and remembering when I was on the planning commission, and Mike, I particularly want to thank you for thank Mike for his patience and explaining things to us new folks and to us electeds who don't always remember the nitty gritty and all the little details that go into community development and all those processes. I've had a lot of patience with all my questions and requests. And I think that, you've left, that Mike's left a really positive mark on the city. And I think that's really a legacy that really anyone could be proud of. So I just want to thank Mike for his service as well.
Thank you so much. All right, Lisa covered a couple of the items I was going to mention. So I don't have anything additional. So with that, everyone, we are adjourned, and enjoy your nice warm evening. Thank you.